Welcome to iPest Education for Petty Pest Control. This important segment, you will learn more about the wood-destroying insect inspection and report. The wood-destroying insect inspection and report not only carries the most liability for the company, but it also creates a huge expectation of trust and professionalism. Understanding the requirements, rules, and process of the inspection and report are imperative for future business relationships and company growth. Be aware that this course is a familiarization on the rules and requirements of the wood-destroying insect report used in Maryland, Virginia, D.C., and West Virginia. Other courses will dive deeper into wood-destroying insect identification and proper inspection protocol and procedures. Realtors work extremely hard for their clients, be it buyer or seller. So, when they get a contract on a house, the real work is just beginning. One of the requirements, in most cases, is to have the home inspected for wood-destroying insects. The goal is to ensure there is no evidence of damage or infestation. When you are performing an inspection, you will find everyone involved is professional. However, once you begin to identify issues and you are required to report on the findings, and things may get a bit uncomfortable. No one likes bad news. Unfortunately, as an inspector, there will be times you have to report news that can turn personalities from good to worse. It is important that you be empathetic and remind everyone that you are merely a reporting agent. You are required to report on what you see. You are not the person that decides if treatments are required. That is the lender's decision.
There are only two WDI inspection forms you need to know. The NPM-33 form is used for Virginia, Washington, D.C., and West Virginia, while the MD1 form is used for Maryland. Both forms are 2 pages long, and although they seem identical, there are distinct differences that you should be aware of and familiar with.
Regardless of which report you are using or which state, some rules will remain consistent with the WDI report. One of the most important is the on, in, or under rule. Basically, the inspector can only call an infestation for any of the wood-destroying insects if the evidence is on, in, or under the structure you are inspecting. It is essential to recognize that all rules can be ambiguous at times. The on, in, or under rule can be confusing in situations like this example. While inspecting a home, you find wood pile directly against a house. Actually leaning on it, there are termites in the wood pile, actively eating the wood. So, do you list active termites on the report? You might think so. It is leaning on the house. However, the answer is no. It is not part of the structure. Therefore, you cannot include the active termites as evidence of infestation, since it is not part of the structure of the house.
That is odd. In contrast, in another scenario, you find a wood pile under the deck of the house, and it also has active termites in the wood. It is not close to the structure, however, it is under the deck. Would this be listed as an infestation of the house in this case?
Good question. However, in that scenario, you would list evidence of infestation on the report. The wood pile has termites, it is under the deck, and the deck is listed as part of the structure. Consider any attached deck as part of the structure for future reference. In review, let's look at this case. A wooden fence post with live termites and damage attached to the house. Infested? No, it is not considered part of the structure. What about VA loans? No. The NPMA 33 report and the MD1 report do not follow any requirements other than those on a report. A separate document may be generated for VA loans, but you cannot alter the rules and requirements on these two reports for any reason.
You need to pay attention on this section as we break down the reports in depth.
So, let's dive deeper into comparing the two reports. It is important to know that until a few years ago, the NPMA report and the MD1 report were almost identical. However, recently, the NPMA 33 report underwent a complete revision, a revision few are aware of. That is what we will discuss in this course. The inspection report is divided into sections, each with its purpose, and some areas have been changed within those sections. In Section 1, the basic pest control business names and addresses have remained the same. The inspector for those companies' identification box remain unchanged. The first change we see is that where the report asks for the license, the NPMA form has changed and now asks for the pesticide business license, whereas the MD1 form only asks for the business license. The date in the box for structures inspected are the same, but they are critical parts of the report as we will discuss in the next frames. Another consistent element on both reports is the date. While this may seem mundane, it is actually crucial information. The WDI report is a legal document, providing a snapshot of the structure's condition at a specific date and time. As we will explore this point in detail later in the course, a simple way to visualize it is to compare inspecting a home in January to how it appears in June. For example, if no evidence of wood-destroying insects was found in January, by June the customer might report carpenter bees buzzing around the deck and creating holes. The customer wants to know why this was not reported in June. Staying in Section 1, you will notice the box for structure to be inspected. It is important to understand how significant that box is. If you only mark single-family home or townhouse, the report only recognizes that specific structure. This means that if it is a single-family home with a detached garage, and you only listed single-family home, the garage is not included or part of the inspection. The report focuses specifically on structure, not fences, non-detached sheds, barns, gazebos, or other types of structures. If it is a detached garage, the report must record it. Never just put house. Describe the structure or structures in that box, and be specific.
Okay, here we go. Section 2 is where the freaks come out. Realtors, homeowners do not understand the requirements of Section 2, and that is what drives them crazy. What makes it worse is that most inspectors don't know how to explain the requirements regarding active versus inactive in the report. Instead of trying to explain the requirements of a reporting agent, inspectors tend to argue and counter the objections.
The first part of Section 2, inspection findings, are the same on both reports. Section 2 is the inspection findings part. It is important to note that the first sentence puts everyone on notice that the inspection is specific to that particular structure, on this exact date and time. It further states that the inspection is based on a careful visual examination of the readily accessible areas only. There is a notification that the inspection does not carry any warranty now or for future damage or infestation. Essentially, we don't have X-ray vision, we cannot see behind walls, and there are obstructions we cannot see through that are not accessible. That first paragraph in Section 2 is very important. Section 2, Box A and Box B are the flashpoints of the report, depending on what you find. If you select Box A under Section 2, it means you found no visible evidence of wood-destroying insects or damage. That is a happy box. Everyone is happy that their deal will go without a hitch regarding infestation or damage.
However, if you mark no visible evidence and later the new homeowner finds damage and/or infestation, they will be after your ass wanting to kill you. Happy people will turn into monsters in that situation.
As we stated, Box B is the most misunderstood part of both reports. Fortunately, this section, Box B, is the same in both reports. Remember, you are reporting on all wood-destroying insects. For the purpose of WDI in these reports, it includes carpenter bees, carpenter ants, wood-boring beetles, and termites. The key word is evidence. Since Box A and Box B are the same on both reports, let's just look at one to simplify this. The first two items you should pay attention to are the word, evidence, and see attached diagram. The word, evidence, is critical. Any evidence of wood-destroying insects listed in either of the three categories below must be listed. That means living insects, dead insects, insect parts, frass, shelter tubes, exit holes, or staining, as well as any visible damage. Any evidence of the above when listed on the report is considered active. Also, notice the statement, see attached diagram. That means if you mark any evidence in Box B, there has to be a graph attached to the report. Since the requirements of the report are for the inspector to mark any evidence, this creates confusion and emotions. Remember, everyone wants a happy report. When you report evidence of WDI, happy goes out the window as it creates problems. People will demand to see living insects. Show me the bugs. When, in fact, you are only fulfilling the requirements and reporting on evidence.
Do not take it personally. Remember, you are just the reporting agent. It is the lender that requires this information, and if treatment is needed, they are the ones that will require it. Should you recommend treatment? Actually, the report will guide you in that situation as well. We can look at some samples of what Box B evidence would look like. Box B, number 1 is self-explanatory. Could be carpenter ants, carpenter bees, termites of wood borers. If they are on, in, or under the structure you are inspecting, you would list them under Box B number 1 as live insects as well as identify them on your diagram. Living insects are seldom contested as you and show the parties the living proof. And here is what confuses realtors and homeowners. They get it when you show them living insects, but they do not understand that any evidence marked under Box B has to be reported, and unless they can prove it has been treated or under warranty, it will be considered active by the lender. A good example of this evidence is shown below. First, dead body part examples could be termite swarmer wings or dead swarmers. In the spring, termites produce swarmas. These are reproductive termites. They swarm to light sources like windows, and most die or shed their wings. These wings and body parts would be evidence of wood-destroying insect infestation if found on an inspection, even though no live termites were present. Insect parts and frass as indicated below, using carpenter ant frass in the photo. In that photo, typical of carpenter ant frass, are dead carpenter ant body parts. Again, this evidence alone is a reportable item and would be considered evidence of infestation and active. Termite shelter tubes are obvious evidence. Sometimes the tubes will be active with the white termites inside, and other times they will be only stains of the termite tubes with no termites in the tubes, just stains. Regardless, with the termite tubes in place and living termites or just stains, both situations must be reported and considered evidence of active infestation, living insects present or not.
All of these wood-destroying insects leave exit holes. Even the exit hole for many of these insects is considered evidence of activity and infestation and must be reported. As you can see, there are many circumstances where different forms of evidence can be present in, on, or under the structure that you are required to list. Nowhere on the report except for Box B, item number 1 does it list living insects, yet all under Box B are considered reportable and active until proven different. It is your job to report it, not debate it. The last item in Box B is number 3, damage. This is the most critical aspect, as you serve as the eyes of both the lender and the buyer. They rely on you to report any damage to their new investment. This is your responsibility and the most important function you have, to report damage. Overlooking visible damage can be catastrophic, resulting in a loss of confidence, legal action, and potential loss of our business license. You are not responsible for hidden damage. That is why thorough documentation is so essential. However, you are responsible for any visible evidence.
Section 2A and B were consistent. However, the lower part of Section 2 is where we start to see the reports differ. The note starting on the lower paragraph is extremely important, and it is consistent on both reports. It states, "This is not a structural damage report." If Box B is checked, it should be understood that some degree of damage, including hidden damage, may be present. If any questions arise regarding damage indicated by this report, it is recommended that the buyer or any interested parties contact a qualified structural professional to determine the extent of damage and the need for repairs.
Paula, that statement may be the most important statement on the entire report. Once you identify damage or infestation, you will most likely be asked, how bad is the damage, whether it needs to be repaired, and whether it is structural damage. You cannot discuss or answer any of those questions. You are a reporting agent only. You can report only what you see, not to the extent of it. You are not a building expert or carpenter. You must refer them to this paragraph.
Maryland, on their MD1 form, adds a sentence to that last paragraph stating the inspector is required to state on the report if the damage is being remediated or is going to be remediated if known. Also, the really big change, which I think is the most important, is that the NPMA 33 form for Virginia, D.C., and West Virginia removed the requirement for the inspector to list evidence of previous treatment. This is huge, as that requirement was used in litigation if it were missed. Maryland kept that requirement, and should an inspector miss any evidence of previous treatment, it would be detrimental in a legal matter.
Most of the evidence of previous treatment will be drill marks in the front stoop, patio, garage or basement area. Also wall void treatments in the basement, garage, or crawl space. Termite bait stations are also obvious and often missed and not listed. Most will be related to past termite treatments.
Since Section 3, 4, and 5 are the same on both reports, let's go over each one together. Section 3 can be tricky if not explained. Basically, it is treatment recommendations if anything is marked in Box B. You will notice there are 3 boxes in that section. As an inspector, you are to check one of the boxes relating to what you identified in Box B Section 2. So let's talk about those 3 boxes in your requirements. Box 1, under Section 3, may be the most confusing and often misused. If you mark anything in Section 2, Box B, you have clearly identified evidence of infestation and/or damage. So why would you not recommend treatment? The guidelines on the back of the report will provide you and all interested parties with information regarding treatment in these cases. But to simplify this, let me give you some examples of when this could happen.
Paula, I have a perfect example of what has happened in the past. Let's say you are doing a WDI inspection on an existing customer, Mr. Smith. 3 years ago, Mr. Smith had termites in the basement. There was damage to one floor joist and some termite tubes in the same area. That damage was professionally repaired, but the old damage was still partially there with the sister board repair. Now, Mr. Smith is selling his house and needs a WDI inspection. You see the evidence and old damage during the WDI inspection. You must still list it as evidence of infestation and damage, even though you know it was treated and repaired. Because it is still there, you still have to list it and make a graph. However, in Section 3, under Box 1, you list why you are not recommending treatment. That is one of the few cases you would use Box 1. Another point, Paula, is that the MD1 form and the NPMA 33 form differ. In Section 3, the difference is Box 2. The MD1 form states that treatment is recommended for the control of NPM. 33 form box 2 change that to read, actions, and/or treatment for the control of. That was added because, in the case of carpenter bees only, removal of the wood damaged or infested with carpenter bees is considered remediation regarding carpenter bees.
Good point, Chad. You are so damn smart. One thing the inspectors forget to do on Box 2 is list the specific insect they are recommending treatment for. Box 3 in Section 3 is to be filled out if you receive authorization to treat the infestation. When the inspection report is first filled out and delivered, the interested parties or realtor may authorize treatment to satisfy the lender. If that is done, Box 3 would be filled out with the control measures you provided. This normally requires issuing another report by simply adding the information to the old report by updating Box 3.
Section 4 is the disclaimer section. Basically, it is saying you are not a superhero, and you do not have X-ray vision.
Well, it is actually a little more than that, Chad. Section 4 can be tricky. For instance, you have to pay attention to what the disclaimers actually say. A good example is a crawl space that has no apparent access, so the obvious number would be to list number 10, which states no access or entry. But you notice, like most crawl spaces, it has crawl space vents which are too small to enter, but nonetheless it is access. The correct numbers for that situation would be number 13, only visual access, number 11, limited access. While we are on the subject of crawl spaces, let's examine tight crawl spaces. Some crawl spaces can be extremely tight and hard to access. Some may be impossible for you, but you must ask yourself, could someone else, perhaps a smaller person, access the crawl? If you do not inspect the crawl and miss damages, and later find out that the home inspector was able to access the crawl, or worse, another pest company, you will be in violation and responsible.
In those cases, call the office and see if a smaller inspector can make the inspection. If the crawl simply cannot be entered and inspected fully, you must list the numbers as before stated, and you must photo the areas you can view and add it to the report. The last step is to call the realtor and notify them you cannot access the crawl for the reasons stated. Typically, you can never complete an inspection with a crawl space without a full inspection, as a rule.
Most importantly, when you encounter a crawl space like this, standing water and wires on the ground, never enter the crawl. The risk of electrocution is significant. List the numbers as 15 and 21 for unsafe conditions. Document everything and make sure to notify the realtor and our office of the unsafe conditions and failure to inspect the area. Here is another great example of how this section can either help or hurt you in a claim. Betty Sue just purchased her house that you inspected last week. On moving in, the first thing she noticed were termite tubes coming up the wall in the garage. Outraged that the termite inspector completely missed the termite tubes.
Who could blame her? Buying a home is one of the single most important investments most of us will make in our life. Because the evidence is so obvious, the home buyer and the realtor are now upset and losing confidence. Checking the report, the office finds the inspector did list number 14 in the garage section, which is cluttered conditions. Listing that alone is still not the fix. That is why we require a photo of any area that you list cluttered conditions on. Now, with the photo, we can get a better understanding of why the termite tubes were not visible.
Remember the snapshot in time statement? Here is another perfect example. You inspect the home, and as usual, people are selling the house and packing up for the big move. Boxes and furniture are everywhere, leaving not much room to inspect. However, when the buyer opens the door, the rooms are crystal clear, and all those obstacles are gone. As it happens, they spot an obvious area of termite damage that anyone could have noticed. Remember, your inspection is indicative of how that structure appeared on that specific date and at that specific time. If you documented it correctly and took photos, there is proof that you could not have seen that evidence. For some reason, inspectors are confused about the attic. So let's clarify this. According to both reports, the inspector must inspect every level of the structure, including all attics if there is pull-down ladder access. If the attic accesses a pop-up that requires a ladder, you are not obligated to inspect the attic, but you must document this by noting number 11 and writing "No ladder." For every home, you must take a photo of the attic entrance regardless and include it in the report.
The additional comment section is not a sales tool. This section should be used for any information that cannot be listed on the infestation report. Do not use this section to sell the potential buyer any services. Stay in your lane, do your job, be a professional.
Page 2. The back of the report is the real meat of the guidelines. Unfortunately, it's the page no one reads, and if they did, it would clear up a lot of confusion and misunderstanding.
100%, and this is where the MD-1 and the VPMA-33 form are very different in treatment recommendations, so pay attention. In the first statement, the VPMA-33 form just added the phrase, "Refer to the NPMA-33 guidelines," which of course the Maryland MD-1 form does not have.
Both reports consist of 2 pages. Page 2, the back of the report, is the most important yet least understood and read part of the document. This information is critical when questioned about the need for treatment or why you have recommended it. I don't need you, the inspector, to become an attorney or try to defend your actions. I just need you to understand the rules of engagement and requirements so that you can refer interested parties to the written word.
Thank you, Judge Rusty. You are absolutely correct. So let's dive into this. Be aware that as we explain this, we will go section by section, pointing out the difference in each section from the MD-1 and the NPMA-33 forms. The first paragraph simply puts the consumer on notice that this report is not a guarantee or warranty as to the absence of wood-destroying insects, nor is it a structural integrity report. Basically, it states that the inspector is not qualified to evaluate any type of damage, construction, or repair.
In paragraph 1, remember what we said about a snapshot in time? Here the report advises the consumer the inspection was only conducted on the readily accessible areas of the structure, including attics and crawl spaces, which permitted entry during the inspection. Remember the ladder rule. Also, probing and sounding the wood is required. Simply tapping the wood can detect hidden damage. If the wood sounds hollow, there is a good chance the wood is compromised beneath the paint. Probing bubbling paint or similar defects in the wood frames can also expose hidden damage. Just be careful not to damage good framing or wood during the process.
From that point in the same paragraph, the report advises the consumer that the inspection company is not responsible for any damages, infestation, or repairs, and that damages and infestation may exist in concealed or inaccessible areas. Further, the report states that if damages were identified on the inspection and report, it may not represent all the damages that may exist on the date of this inspection.
Last but not least, in paragraph 1, it explains that the report is not just a termite report, but that it covers all the wood-destroying insects listed. Also, most believe this report is good for only 30 days, when in fact, it is good for 90 days. Since paragraph 2 is the focal point of change in the 2 reports, let's separate each one and discuss it. Paragraph 2 is where MD-1 and the NPMA-33 form change dramatically. In October 2019, the NPMA-33 form changed for the better for the pest industry, but Maryland did not change their MD-1 form. Let's look at the MD-1 form first. It states, if any evidence is found, but no activity and no evidence of previous treatment, then a treatment may be recommended. The word may is ambiguous and unclear to the consumer. It continues, stating that even if there is evidence of previous treatment but not within the last 5 years, and there is no activity or documentation of liquid treatment in the last 5 years, or if the property is currently under warranty from a licensed pest control company, a treatment may be recommended. This is what we used to call the 5-year rule. Also, as I stated, the word may is not clear to most consumers. In other words, you may or you may not. The NPMA form recognized this and changed it significantly by removing that entire paragraph from their report. The 5-year rule is also unusual as it stated that even if the structure showed signs of previous treatment, but has not been treated in the last 5 years, treatment may be recommended. As I stated, the word may is an ambiguous word. The NPMA-33 form, you will see, change the word may to should. That makes a huge difference.
Correctomondo, Judge. You is a smart man. The word may signifies discretion or optional, while the word should suggests a preferred course of action.
Now let's take a look at the same paragraph, paragraph 2, on the NPMA-33 form. I think you will agree there is a huge difference.
The first sentence is where we see a change from the start. Treatment or corrective action should be taken if live termites are found. You will notice the word may has been replaced by the word should. Remember what we stated the difference in the two words are?
Oh man, here is where it nails the requirements and should meet any challenges to your call by any interested persons. The report goes on to say, if no evidence of previous treatment is documented and evidence is found, even if no living termites are observed, treatment or corrective action by a licensed pest control company should be recommended.
This is what realtors are just not aware of. In their mind, for you to recommend treatment, there have to be living insects active and present. This is the root of many disagreements, when in fact you are required by the report to recommend treatment if any evidence is found and there is no documentation of treatment or warranty. Again, when the dispute comes up, and it will simply inform them that you are just the reporting agent and performing the requirements written on the back of the report. Be empathetic, not argumentative, but do your job.
At the time of this inspection.
You will notice on both reports they mention termites almost exclusively. The last sentence here on the NPMA-33 form directs the consumer to the guidelines, which gives the same instructions for treatment, except for carpenter bees, where removal of the damaged wood and evidence. Carpenter bees are the only insect on both reports that removal of the wood is remediation.
Paragraph 3 is the same on both reports with no changes, so let's just look at one. This paragraph deals with obstructions in inaccessible areas. Remember the boxes and numbers you checked onto the front page, section 4? It simply states that you cannot see through walls, floors, and ceilings, nor can you move furniture, break apart frames, or dismantle anything during your inspection. Remember, you can still sound and probe the wood, but do not break it apart unless it is already compromised. Paragraph 3 also notifies the consumer that certain areas, such as attics or crawl spaces, may not be accessible or may have limited access due to physical constraints for the inspector, or if a ladder is necessary. You will notice that there is no stated height requirement. Some have referenced 18 inches or 24 inches of clearance in a crawl space, but this is not included in the report. Just because one cannot enter a crawl space does not mean a smaller person cannot. You must inform the company and the realtor if a smaller inspector is needed. If it is a pop-up attic, indicate limited access and specify the words, "No ladder." If the crawl space is unsafe, explain this in the report. If the crawl space is too small for anyone to enter, take a photo and provide an explanation in writing in the report. Document everything. That was a lot to take in. So let's see how the two reports are similar, how they are the same, and what is important and consistent for both of them. Section 1 of both reports is basically the same, except that Maryland asked for the business license, while the NPMA-33 form asked for the pesticide business license. A pesticide business license is different from a regular business license. Big difference maker. The evidence of previous treatment removed from NPMA-33 is huge. Both reports pages 2 are worth extra study. On the exams, you will need to point out the difference between the two and the advantages one has over the other. Basically, it is how the requirements work and are stated. Those requirements are what you will need to know and explain when confronted with Show Me the Bugs. Good luck and happy hunting!